So, good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Philippa Haynes.
And I'm Mark Lee. Welcome to another episode of the Accountant's Success Secrets podcast.
This is where we showcase and celebrate successful accountants who have been running their own practice for a good few years and whose stories can inspire and encourage other accountants around the UK.
We ask them to share their story, including the highs, the lows, and what they've learned on the way. Our aim is to provide some fundamental insights for you, our loyal listener. And if you'd like to share your story in a similar way, do please get in touch with Philippa or myself.
So today we are delighted to introduce Suzannah Whelan of Sinclair Whelan Bookkeeping to our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, Suzannah's an ICB registered bookkeeper who set up her practice in 2009. She provides a full bookkeeping, accounting and tax compliance service for sole traders and liaises with accountants when it comes to company clients. In addition to her ICB certification, Suzannah's got on to achieve ICB diplomas in self-assessment, tax returns and payroll. And to answer the obvious question, but Suzannah's a bookkeeper, not an accountant. No. In my mind, and Philippa's too, bookkeepers are providing accounting services. Bookkeepers and accountants, we can think of them in much the same way.
Yeah. So, Suzannah, is there anything you'd like to add by way of introduction, just in case we've missed something?
No, just thank you very much for having me on, and I'm really excited and really delighted as well to be flying the flag for my fellow bookkeepers.
Fantastic. Well, as you know, we try to keep the podcast to just under 30 minutes, and we do that by focusing the discussion around a few focused questions. And I'll start with a combination question. What attracted you to start your own bookkeeping accounting practice in 2009, and how did you go about that, given your background prior to that was something quite different, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So accounting was never something that was on my radar, which was quite funny because my dad was a chartered accountant and he had his own practice, successful local practice with 3 offices. So it was never something I wanted to go into. I wasn't remotely interested. I always knew that I wanted to work in the media. And I remember being asked, when I was little, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I used to say, I want to be the person who decides where the adverts go. So really, really specific. Partly that was because I had an uncle who set up a media agency. So I knew a little bit about it. And I just found that whole thing really interesting, knowing who was going to buy your products and where you were going to reach them. So that's what I wanted to do. I did really well at school, worked really, really hard and got good GCSE and A-level results. Got into uni, but deferred for a year because I didn't really want to go. And I felt strongly that working in media, I didn't need a degree. It wasn't like medicine or law that you have to have one. And I wanted to work. I wanted to be independent. So I managed to get myself in an ad agency where I worked for about 18 months. Didn't really enjoy it there. And then I managed to land my dream job at Channel 4 when I was 20.
Wow.
So really young still. I got a foot in the door there working as a PA for the head of the sales department. I kind of wavered over taking that job because although I really wanted to work for Channel 4, I didn't want to be a PA. I wanted to be working in media. And actually, when they offered me the job, I said to the recruitment agency, I don't think I want to take it. And immediately got a phone call back from the guy I would be working for, saying, no, please come and work for me. I really want you. And if you want to work in sales, as soon as something comes available, I will move you across. And he was as good as his word. And within 3 months, I was working in the sales department selling. So I did that I was there 11 years, worked my way up to a decent level. I was a group head. I had a team of 6 people working for me. And I managed and ran a portfolio with annual billings of £120 million. So goodness. I did really well. And I really did that job. I loved it, and it was work hard, play hard. It was an amazing place to work in your 20s.
And what then happened that transitioned out of that?
So that was what I refer to as my previous life, which was before I had children. So when I had my first baby, we'd moved out of London at that point because I didn't want to have children in central London and bring them up there. So moved out of London, moved back to Essex, where I'm from originally. So I had a longer commute. It was about an hour and a half because Channel 4 was West London.
Yeah.
Good hour and a half, sometimes longer because the trains were not reliable. And just felt like I wasn't giving any part of my life 100%. It's hard leaving my baby. I only went back part-time after I had him. They were very, very good. They created a role for me. But it was very much seen as a stopgap role until I was ready to come back full-time. And I just felt that I would never be able to go back full-time. And then when I had my second baby, it was just going to be too much. And just, financially as well, the train fare was extortionate. And then putting 2 in childcare, it just wasn't worth it. And I wasn't going to do it. So it was a case of thinking, right, well, what am I going to do next? And I did want to work. I wasn't under immediate pressure, which was good. I had good savings, and my husband also worked in the media, and so was in a similar position to me, long hours, long commute, but on a decent salary, so could afford for me not to work and not to work full time, certainly for a while. So it was a case of thinking, what am I going to do? I wanted to work for myself. I couldn't think of anything else I could do locally that would be anything like similar to what I was doing before. So it was a question of needing a complete and utter career change. I didn't want to. It was quite hard to think of going from having a career like that to working in a small office, working for somebody else. Didn't really want to do that. So I wanted to work for myself, and it was a question of thinking, what can I do? And then randomly one day I saw this flyer. I think it was for someone like the Distance Learning College or someone, and they were advertising doing ICB qualifications to be a bookkeeper, and how bookkeeping was an amazing career, and every business needed a bookkeeper. And I spoke to my dad because he was a chartered accountant. Although annoyingly, by this point, he had sold his practice because neither myself or my sisters had shown any interest in going into the accounting industry. My sister is now a chartered accountant, so that's a real shame.
I love it.
Really. He was quite cross because he'd sold his practice, and he I think he might have retired by then. He went and worked for he'd sold it to one of the big 10, one of the top 10 companies, and went and was a partner there. But so I didn't get any kind of inherited clients or anything from that. But I did have my dad to give me advice, and technical advice particularly, which was really good in those early days, because although you do your qualifications, and the ICB qualifications are really, really thorough, and they're very high pass mark to enable you to set up a practice without prior experience, it's still good to have people you can talk to for stuff like that. So that was how I set up my practice, and it was always with the view at that point that I would just be doing it really just a few hours here and there, just to make a little bit of extra money while the children were little. But then I knew I would have the option, if I wanted to grow it as they grew older, and that's what I did.
Yeah, I mean, we always have a pre-chat with our guests, just so that we can ensure that when we go live, we've got a little bit of information that we can pull up. And I know that when we were talking to you, you said there were some really like 3 or 4 key things that you learned along the way. So obviously you had this big career at Channel 4 and elsewhere, but obviously working for yourself and going into bookkeeping, which again was quite different for you. You were starting from scratch. But just tell us about those kind of 2 or 3 things that you learned along the way, which, as you've said, you've sort of taken all the way through your business to now, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, there were actually, surprisingly, although we're talking about 2 completely different careers, there are a lot of transferable skills between the 2. So things like we used to have to do reconciliations, we used to have to do forecasting, you're negotiating with clients, you're pricing airtime, which is, you know, you're understanding the value, and you're just having those relationships. So there was that. But what I've learned along the way are things like, well, my pricing, that was a big learning curve, how to price my services. So it's, especially at the beginning, it's really easy to sell yourself short, because you just want to get clients, and you sort of thinking, well, it's all extra because I'm not earning anything, so it's all extra. So if I can earn a little bit, then that's all in my pocket. But that was a learning curve. So I definitely priced too low at the beginning, and I was doing hourly pricing. It was very, very different when I started up, because most people were on desktop software. So you had to really, unless you were going to buy really expensive desktop licenses, which I couldn't afford at that point, you had to go in and work at a client's premises. And that really, that's what I did at the beginning. So I would have a day at different clients and in the week, and I didn't have, you didn't have the flexibility then to sort of do other things. And that really, and also because you're visible in an office, you feel like you have to charge an hourly rate. And so there's lots of restrictions there, which kind of restrict you growing. So that was something I learned. Something else I've learned was to embrace technology. And again, that was hard to do when you're working on site, because why are you going to pay for technology that is going to save you time when you're billing an hourly rate on site?
Exactly.
They see you, if you're like, well, I've finished now, I've done my job, then, you know, they're going to expect a lower invoice. So that was something I had to work my head around, which luckily I did. I did that quite a couple of years before COVID hit, but it was quite a hard thing to do, and to transfer those existing clients onto a completely different way of working. But I did it.
How did you do that, Suzannah? Because I think you're absolutely right. And when you're charging an hourly rate, we tend to forget that means the more efficient you become,
Exactly.
the lower the fees you're charging. So there's almost a disincentive to be efficient. And well, I might as well take this slowly and relax, so I'll get paid more for being slow.
Yeah, which didn't sit well with me. And also, like I said, it meant you didn't want to invest in technology like data capture software, which would cost you money and save you time and reduce your fees. So it didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's the age-old thing of presenteeism, isn't it? Really, which is you didn't have a job anymore or a career, but actually you didn't really have your own business either, because you were sat in somebody else's offices. And whilst that, you know, that does happen, there are FDs and all of those good things, and that makes sense. Actually, if you're doing the day-to-day of it and you're seen at a desk and at a chair, then the principles of other team members are going to apply to you as well. You know, people are going to watch what you're doing.
Definitely. And it meant things like I couldn't go on webinars and stuff, which weren't a thing in the early days, but later on, and even just being able to take a call from another client if I was at a different client's office, and not even having that information to hand that they might be requesting. So it massively restricted me at the beginning, but I think that was just how it was back then. And I did make a big effort to change it once. I think I was ahead of the game in changing it. I certainly didn't wait until COVID, when everything changed for us anyway. So that was something. And then the other thing I've learned, which I think is probably the main thing that has transformed things for me, is how important it is to have support from other people in the same boat.
And I'll say at this point that we've got quite a few bookkeepers watching this and sort of clapping you. We've got Sobi, we've got Kirsty, we've got Mehul. So we've got networking there. We've got your network.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it is so important. And again, I didn't actually have that until COVID, because COVID, ICB TV set up, and that was an amazing support thing where the ICB ran a webinar pretty much every day that you could just drop into. First of all, it was just like a "Is everyone okay?" webinar, and then it was really valuable as all the different things were coming out about furlough and all the different grants and stuff. It was brilliant for that. But on those webinars, we had the chat, and we were all chatting on the webinars and talking. So you got to know people and build up that network. And then at the same time, other things like the 6FB sprung up. And again, you kind of got to know people online, and all the different Facebook groups became more active. So building that support network and having people to ask either technical questions, but also advice on software, and things like, what would you do in this situation? Or this client has just said this, what should I do? It's so valuable to have that. And I would urge anyone starting up, be active on social media, join your branch meetings, and go to events and meet people and network. It makes all the difference.
I think that is superb advice. I totally endorse it. And yeah, I've also seen, in fact, I'm active in a number of Facebook groups for accountants and bookkeepers, to give back and to share and to help them in ways that I can. And occasionally somebody will ask to come and join the Sole Practice Club or talk to me about mentoring. That's a nice to have. If I'd had that opportunity to get support from others, 10, 20 years ago, my career might have been very different, but it was a different world back then. And it's so useful. And I think also there's a number of bookkeepers and accountants who only think of social media as a means to reach prospective clients, when actually used, if you're in the right groups, you might not get clients, but you'll get that crucial help and support from fellow bookkeepers and accountants.
100%.
And great to hear you endorsing the value of that.
Yeah,
Totally
yeah,
right.
definitely. And I'd say LinkedIn is, I find that my sort of networking that I do on LinkedIn is with other accountants and bookkeepers. I do have a few clients that I'm linked in with, but a lot of my clients aren't really active on LinkedIn. They're more on Facebook. So I tend to find that I get more prospective clients through Facebook and word of mouth rather than LinkedIn.
That's really good to know, actually, isn't it? To understand what you're doing and what the objective is, because I think sometimes
100%.
we can all be part of an echo chamber and sort of be talking to other bookkeepers or whatever it is, and actually they're our support network, but in order to actually get some business, you potentially need to go somewhere else, or at least be speaking to somebody else. I guess that sort of moves us into the kind of the mistakes, although I think you said, as you've gone through, there were sort of some mistakes you've made, but has there been anything significant that the listeners would kind of benefit from hearing, do you think?
So I'd say my main mistakes, like we touched on before, pricing and scope creep, because that's related to pricing. That's really, really hard. Put your fees up regularly, review regularly as well to make sure you're charging for everything, including if the volume of work has changed. The not networking with other bookkeepers and not having support was a mistake at the beginning. Although I say it's a mistake, it wasn't so much as a mistake as not available to me. I was slow to advertise and market myself. I think it was a bit of a knock in my self-esteem from being in a really sort of exciting career to then being, and I say this in inverted commas, just a stay-at-home mum, with a little side hustle. And so that was quite hard to market myself. And actually, different to what a lot of your people on your podcast have said previously, one of the mistakes that they would say they made was taking on every single client who came their way, whereas I actually said no to a lot of clients, and probably more than I should have done. One of my
That's
rules,
lovely. That's interesting. Why is that? Why?
One of my rules at the beginning was I was only going to work with people that I liked. from the offset. So if
That's
someone
that's a good rule.
yeah, and I've stuck to that. I've stuck to that. So if somebody called me and I did something was off about them, I didn't like their attitude or just didn't feel right, I'd turn them away. And I'm glad that I wouldn't say is a mistake. That I think is a strength. But I also did say no to a lot of work because I felt overwhelmed at the beginning and I was worried about how I would fit it in. And that relates back to being in clients' offices and not having enough time to fit in work that I could do remotely. Because that really restricted me, being on a client's premises each day and the travel time and then having to rush around, get back, pick up the children from school, take them to swimming lessons or whatever they were doing. By the time I could then devote time to sort of any work that I could do from home, which tended to be my self-assessment work, I just didn't have any time. So that probably made me turn on away more than I should have done, and why I grew slowly. I don't know whether that's a mistake. It was
from the way you've spoken, Suzannah, I don't think that was a mistake. I think that was very wise and ensured you didn't have, as far as I know, you didn't suffer from burnout.
No, I didn't. I mean, I was busy,
yeah.
But then I look at how slow I was to grow my business, and I think maybe it was a mistake. So I mentioned this before we came on air, but one of the things I did a few months ago was I thought I'd love to see how much I've earned since I've been self-employed, or how much I've turned over in terms of revenue.
Brilliant.
So I added up all my revenues for the last 15 years to a total, and what really surprised me was more than half of that has come in the last 4 years.
That's fantastic.
So what's changed?
Put those things in place. So cloud software, working remotely, embracing technology, pricing. So I started using Go Proposal, which has allowed me to price a lot more effectively. Marketing myself and taking on more work, and networking and having the support of a group of bookkeepers. And I set up with a couple of other bookkeepers a couple of years ago a little accountability support group, and that has been instrumental for me in growing. We compare pricing, we talk about issues, we advise each other on software and give each other feedback. It is massively accelerated my growth as a business.
That sounds wonderful. And we need to move on, although as we often say, we could carry on talking about this sort of thing.
Certainly could.
Yeah. What's your relationship like with the accountants that you work alongside?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Haven't really had any issues. Don't talk to most of them all that often. I think that is often the difference between my role and their role. I do now partner with an accountant for clients who come to me and want to do everything in-house. So I can offer limited company accounts and corporation tax returns through her by subcontracting that out. But yeah, if someone's happy with their accountant, I'm quite happy to work alongside them. Brilliant. So yeah, generally good.
Great stuff. I would be very remiss if I didn't pick up on the marketing thing that you said and said, you sort of stepped that up a little bit. And I guess with all marketing, you sort of put yourself out there and try and build awareness, and you talk about, we ask what makes you unique, which I think is quite a pointy question. But what is it? How have you tackled marketing, and how have you got that message out?
Well, you asked me a few months ago what makes you
unique,
and I said I don't know what makes me unique. Nothing. I'm not unique. And you told me off, and so I've thought about that. And
sorry,
no, you're right. And I needed to be able to convey what I meant a bit better. And what I meant, I think, is within the network, that people who are listening to this podcast, that those kind of accountants and bookkeepers, and the ones that I'm connected to on LinkedIn and as part of my ICB branches and things like that, we are in an echo chamber, which is what you said before. Yeah. We think we think that everyone does what we do, and that they work with clients in the way we do, with all the technology, with daily and weekly bookkeeping, and actually we are in the minority, and it amazes me how few other firms do it, and how, you know, you read the statistics about not, you know, clients not being on cloud software and not having bank feeds and not using data capture software and other things, and only speaking to their accountant at that return time, or worse, at year end, you know, and sometimes 8-9 months after year end. And so I would say that I don't say I'm unique, because I know that there are other people doing it, but we are in the minority. The doing the daily bookkeeping and the weekly bookkeeping, speaking with clients on a regular basis and really understanding them, getting to know them personally, understanding their business, so that you have that oversight and you can be that sounding board and that trusted advisor. So my clients will automatically pick up the phone and talk to me about anything to do with their business. It might not be accounting necessarily. They might want to talk to me about strategies to do with with their sales, and whether or not they should be taking larger deposits. Well, that's something I've put in place for a client recently, or staffing issues and things like that. And I think when you're in business, like I've said about needing that support myself, clients need that support. And if they're a sole director particularly, it's really useful to have someone you can talk to who understands your business and knows exactly what's going on day to day, as well as knowing where the finances are. So that would be my thing that I would say is different from the majority, although I know that there are lots of other bookkeepers and accountants out there who are doing it now.
Well, I think that's great. It's effectively, it's one of the secrets to your success.
Yeah.
As well, the relationships that you've been building with clients that enable you to attract more clients of the type that you want to work with. There's another coach I know who says, don't deal with tossers. DDT is his big thing. DDWT, sorry. So it's the same logic that we all apply, and that everybody, once they've developed a degree of confidence in what they're doing, is able to say no. And you were doing that very early on, so full credit to you. Well done.
Yeah. And I think, it's fair to say that just from what I've heard about your sort of backstory and kind of now, whilst maybe you didn't understand the merits of networking when you set up your own business, you are a networker. You're a sociable person, and so once the light had gone on, I know that you've got your little your group of bookkeepers, and I know who they are, but I also know that you have really regular and powerful meetings, as you said, which are invaluable. And also, you're out there, you're at Accountex, all of that good stuff. Yeah. You are kind of setting up your non-negotiables, which I know we talked about a while back, and are really beginning to come on, certainly in LinkedIn now. So I think your story is just a really powerful one. Absolutely. For lots of people. It's a human story, I think, which I think you've learned a lot, and you've grown consistently and well as well. You're not one of those who normally it's the reverse, but you've kind of grown well and said no, which I know would be music to Lorraine Ellison's ears. But we, as always, we've come to an end, haven't we, Mark? It goes so quickly. But it's been fantastic to have you on our podcast today. I know it's something that's sort of taken you outside of your comfort zone, but I think you've been brilliant. So please share your contact details with people. How can they get in touch with you? Just so that. Go on.
So I'm on LinkedIn, Suzannah Whelan. I've got a business Facebook page, Sinclair Whelan Bookkeeping, and my website is www.sinclairwhelanbookkeeping.co.uk.
Lovely. Thank you. And Philippa, how can listeners find out more about you and Insight 101?
So again, I'm on LinkedIn as well. A great platform, I think, certainly for all three of us, in fact. But also my website, www.insight101.co.uk. And Mark, tell us about your Soul Practice Club.
Thanks. Well, online everywhere. I'm Bookmark Lee. Even my business card is a bookmark. So you can find me on LinkedIn or on the web. I tend to support accountants who run their own practices, feel isolated, frustrated, and overwhelmed. Some want one-to-one mentoring. Some appreciate the camaraderie and support from my Soul Practice Club, which operates in much the same way as the networking group that Suzannah was talking about just there. And some accountants, of course, want both from me, which is lovely.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it. If you've enjoyed the Accountant Success Secrets podcast, please share the love online, subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or have a rerun on YouTube, but let us have your feedback too.
Absolutely. It all helps to potentially broaden the reach of this podcast. So do please contact Philippa or myself if you would like to be interviewed on a future podcast. Thanks so much again to Suzannah and to Philippa as well for making it all happen. See you next time.
Thanks, Suzannah. Bye for now.
Bye.